I don't think you realise how badly this could go wrong. Just a small amount of toxic chemicals in this tree and we've got a death trap on our hands. A murky, soupy, disgusting death trap of an aquarium. That's what they're saying anyway. But I don't believe that. I reckon we can make it work. I mean, how hard can it be? With over 100,000 species of tree in the world, have you ever wondered why only a handful of wood types ever make it into aquariums? Well, a few months ago I was visiting family when the opportunity came up to take home a couple of dead bonsai trees. More specifically, some miniature Acer trees. Unbeknown to me at the time, it turns out that all those expensive bonsai trees you see for sale in aquarium shops are not bonsai trees at all. In fact, they are a manufactured product. And so what I had actually created by taking home these miniature Acers was a whole heap of trouble. Scour the internet for just a minute and you will find all kinds of forum comments saying one simple thing: it's not worth the risk. So let's look at the science for a second. Why do we find such a small proportion of the world's wood stock in our aquarium shops? Well, there is good reason. The mopani, manzanita and such like that we regularly see in aquarium shops represent some of the safest bets. These are the woods that dry out quickly and easily and are easily debarked, which is where you will find the majority of tannins and polyphenols. Basically, these woods are easily made dead and neutral, meaning they are much less likely to cause any problems. The real problems lie in greenwood, or to put it another way, wood that is still alive. The sap and chemicals contained in greenwood can cause all manner of issues. They could harm your fish, upset your water chemistry, and even impact plant growth. So the key thing to avoid all of this is to make sure my bonsai tree is completely dead and free from any sap. And after a lot of reading, this is how I set about making the bonsai tree as inert as possible. Step 1 was to soak the bonsai tree in bleach. Now, as long as you neutralize bleach after using it on wood, rocks or ornaments, it can be a great way of getting rid of nasty bugs and algae. So long as you soak afterwards in a bath of water and water conditioner like Chem Prime, or completely dry out the tree to surface, you can use bleach quite safely for lots of things. In fact, did you know that some people even bleach dip their plants? Once I'd given the bonsai tree a decent 24-hour soak in bleach water, it was time for my second step: drying out in the oven. Now this is where I made my first big mistake. I whacked the temperature up to 200 degrees Celsius and set about cooking the bonsai for a couple of hours. The only problem was that such a high temperature was enough to boil the sap. And unlike maple sap, this Acer did not leave me with a sweet, delicious smell. Rather, it coated the entire house, and presumably my lungs, with a horrid, toxic smell of burning tar. And honestly, I am not making this up. I genuinely Googled whether I'd accidentally created a poison gas. And it turns out that the internet has surprisingly little experience of baking Acers in the oven. So after leaving every window in the house open and spending a cold afternoon sat in the garden with a cat, I finally checked out the Acer. And whilst it seemed a bit charred, it also still looked quite red and alive at the tips of the branches. So having learnt my lesson, it had one last stint in the oven, this time low and slow at a modest 80 degrees C, which avoided the nasty ramifications of earlier. After this, it had one final wash in bleach water for good measure, and then it was ready to go. Or so I hoped. The first thing I did was to trim a couple of the branches so the tree would sit nicely in the centre of the aquarium. I was using my 70-litre Dennerle Scapers tank, which can achieve a nice bit of depth, and I had the vision of the tree exploding out the middle of a Dragonstone orb. The other idea was that the space where the roots nestle would create a decent system of caves and crevices for my Epistogramma to breed in. So to build up the Dragonstone structure, I started with a piece of acrylic which I could glue everything to, and then create one single structure that could hopefully be lifted nice and easily into the aquarium once finished. This meant that I didn't have the glass getting in my way, and by placing the acrylic on a lazy Susan rotator, I could really easily see every angle of the build. To glue the rock, I used the tried and tested method of cigarette filters and superglue. I never cease to be amazed at how quickly and how securely this method can bind materials together, and it made quick construction of a complicated stone structure really easy. If you have not tried this method before, it really is very simple. You take a cigarette filter and place it between the 2 points of contact where a rock touches. You then carefully squeeze normal liquid superglue onto the filter so that it absorbs the liquid. After about 10 seconds, you will start to see a chemical reaction take place, creating quite a bit of heat and vapour. Then, after about another 10 seconds, the reaction is over and the filter has turned solid as a rock and bound together whatever it was touching. I'd highly recommend you do this technique in a well-ventilated area and take precautions like wearing a mask. However, in the true fashion of this project so far, I took none of these precautions because I'm an idiot. So after a few hours of unventilated gluing, the basic structure was coming along well. And as it got to the top, I was able to get rocks to overhang slightly, which really helped create the effect of the orb cupping the bonsai tree just as I had visualised. After a lot of additional gluing for structural support, it was finally time to see if I could lift the whole thing in one go without causing any damage to the structure or the aquarium. And this is the true test of how good the cigarette filter and superglue method is. I could basically lift the whole thing from one of the smallest rocks and nothing wobbled or cracked in the slightest. And after a slightly more delicate approach to actually putting it into the tank, we finally had everything in place to start planting. And the planting for this tank was pretty straightforward, since I wanted the bonsai tree to do the talking. So I ripped up some marimo moss balls and glued little bits of the crevices in between the rocks, which also very usefully covered any unsightly cigarette filters that were on show. And remember how I wanted to ensure a decent cave system in the middle? Well, to stop any substrate from filling these gaps, and also because I wanted to experiment with its ability to control water quality and support plant growth, I stuffed any gaps in the rocks with sphagnum moss before adding substrate. I then used the old Denode Scaper soil which I had saved when breaking down the previous scape, and in this I simply planted a whole bunch of dwarf Sagittaria, which I think started out life about 3 years ago in one of my very first tanks on this channel, and has always grown incredibly well for me. Dotted in between the dwarf Sag, I also planted small pockets of Marsilea hirsuta, which will send out runners as well, and create a nice bit of textural difference in the carpet. And then it was time for the star of the show. In order to bring the bonsai tree back to life, I glued my Chrysanthemum Monte Carlo to the ends of the branches, hoping that in time this will fill out completely and cover the branches to give the effect of a luscious tree surviving within the clutches of the rocky orb. The tank itself was hooked up to my Awase Biomaster Thermo 250 with an inline CO2 diffuser and a Chihiros A2 lighting unit. I also rigged the tank up to an auto doser with my DIY fertilizer and set it up on a daily estimative index routine with weekly 50% water changes. And now the waiting game began. Would all my efforts of gluing a beautiful Dragonstone orb and meticulously drying and bleaching the bonsai tree be in vain? Would this aquarium ever be safe for fish? And the following day, the signs were not good. Already a slight oily film was starting to form. But there are a number of factors that could cause this in a new tank, so I tried not to be too concerned. And it did stay stable for a few weeks. Water tests were good, and I even started to stock the tank. But around week 3, it started getting worse. A really green, oily film took over the tank. And bear in mind, this was all happening in a tank with a surface skimmer, so I was pretty concerned. But again, oily films can be a common occurrence in any aquarium. There was nothing to confirm this was directly associated with the bonsai tree specifically, and so I continued with daily removal of the oil and hoped for the best. And as a couple more weeks went by, things started to settle down. I was still conducting regular water tests and keeping a close eye on the fish, and there was nothing of concern. So I can only presume that the oily film was nothing more sinister than the filter adapting to the new environment and the influx of new fish and food, or the final bit of sap or detritus did leach from the bonsai tree in the early stages. But what I can confirm is that no fish were harmed in the making of this video, so I think we can call that a success. Flash forward another month, and the Monte Carlo is finally starting to adapt to its new life as an epiphyte, taking nutrients directly from the water column. Although I could probably have achieved a quicker and more mature effect by using moss, it was really exciting to test out one more technique in what has been a mammoth experiment of an aquarium. So from discovering all about making wood aquarium safe to building a pretty dramatic Dragonstone orb, finally it was time to kick back and enjoy the fish. And boy do we get some good ones. Here we have a beautiful mixed shoal of purple harlequin and copper harlequin rasbora, and they provide all the safety and security to ensure that my 4th generation of Epistogramma trifasciata can enjoy exploring their new home. And if you want to find out more about these beautiful Epistogramma, click the top card, or let YouTube choose your next video for you by clicking the bottom card. Cheers!